This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore.
There are a lot of loathsome qualities of Donald Trump. He's a racist, he's a fascist, he's a liar, he is unempathetic, he's a narcissist, some would argue a sociopath. But there are other qualities as well that this reporting from the New York Times, this new reporting that just dropped this weekend, why did they drop it on the weekend, not on a weekday when it's going to get coverage? It's beyond me. But that it is backing up. It's not new information that he's a thief and a scammer and a con man. And that he has shifted the priority of the Republican Party, or the qualities, to be that as well. To straight up scam like $120 million from unsuspecting Donald Trump supporters. That's the worst part of this, is that he's scamming the same hardworking Americans he claims to care so deeply about. He's scamming veterans. He's scamming active duty people. I'm going to talk about a case where he's scamming someone who is now dead from cancer. Someone who was almost on their deathbed, dying of cancer, and Donald Trump bilked thousands of dollars from him. And the Republican Party did as well. This story is about the New York Times reporting this article called How Trump Steered Supporters into Unwitting Donations. Online donors were guided into weekly recurring contributions. Demands for refunds spiked. Complaints to banks and credit card companies soared, but the money helped keep Donald Trump's struggling campaign afloat. This story, I'm going to talk about it in three parts. The first is kind of an overview of what took place. Then I'm briefly going to talk about the one victim that I just mentioned, Mr. Blatt, Stacey Blatt, the late Stacey Blatt. And then I'm going to talk about exactly how it worked. What scam-tastic bullshit they endeavored to take tens of millions of dollars from hardworking people all across the country who were either conned into believing the agenda of Donald Trump, or they're just terrible people who decided Donald Trump was their bet. Let's talk about the article. Now, I briefly mentioned Stacey Blatt, the man who has died, and his brother is now talking about the case. And that's the name that I'm going to read first here when I get into this article. But what the Blatts believed was duplicity was actually an intentional scheme to boost revenues by the Trump campaign and the for-profit company that processed its online donations, WinRed. Facing a cash crunch and getting badly outspent by the Democrats, the Trump campaign, had begun last summer to set up reoccurring donations by default for online donors for every week until the election. Contributors had to wade through a fine print disclaimer and manually uncheck a box to opt out. As the election neared, the Trump team made the disclaimer increasingly opaque, an investigation by the New York Times showed. It introduced a second pre-checked box, known internally as a quote-unquote money bomb, that doubled a person's contribution. Eventually, its solicitations featured lines of text in bold and capital letters that overwhelmed the opt-out language. The tactic ensnared scores of unsuspecting Trump loyalists, retirees, military veterans, nurses, and even experienced political operatives. Soon, banks and credit card companies were inundated with fraud complaints from the president's own supporters about donations they had not intended to make, sometimes for thousands of dollars. Bandits, said Victor Amelino, a 78-year-old Californian who made a $990 online donation to Mr. Trump in early September via WinRed. It reoccurred 7 more times, adding up to almost $8,000. Victor Amelino said, "I'm retired. I can't afford to pay all that damn money." The sheer magnitude of the money involved is staggering for politics. In the final 2.5 months of 2020, the Trump campaign, the Republican National Committee, and their shared accounts issued more than 530,000 refunds worth $64.3 million to online donors. All campaigns make refunds for various reasons, including to people who give more than the legal limit. But the sum the Trump operation refunded dwarfed that of Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s campaign and his equivalent Democratic committees, which made 37,000 online refunds, totaling $5.6 million in that time. The reoccurring donations swelled Mr. Trump's treasury in September and October, just as his finances were deteriorating. He was then able to use tens of millions of dollars he raised after the election under the guise of fighting his unfounded fraud claims to help cover the refunds he owed. In effect, the money that Mr. Trump eventually had to refund amounted to an interest-free loan from unwitting supporters at the most important juncture of the 2020 race. Political strategists, digital operatives, and campaign finance experts say they could not recall ever seeing refunds at such a scale. Mr. Trump, the RNC, and their shared accounts refunded far more money to online donors in the last election cycle than every federal Democratic candidate and committee in the country combined. Donald Trump refunded more money than every Democratic candidate and their committees combined last election cycle. If that doesn't ring as scammery to you, you're not paying attention. And what kind of people were they scamming? They feature a few different people in this article from the New York Times, which I would encourage you to read. It will be linked down in the description below. I'm going to talk about one. Stacey Blatt, the late Stacey Blatt. Stacey Blatt was in hospice last September listening to Rush Limbaugh's dire warnings about how badly Donald Trump's campaign needed money, when he went online and chipped in everything he could, $500. It was a big sum for the 63-year-old battling cancer and living in Kansas City on less than $1,000 per month. He gave half of a month's income to Donald Trump. He lives in Kansas City. He's dying of cancer, which he ultimately succumbed to. And he gave $500 to Donald Trump of his $1,000 a month. I'm repeating it because it is so egregious. But that single contribution, federal records show it was his first ever, quickly multiplied. Another $500 was withdrawn the next day, then $500 the next week, and every week through mid-October without his knowledge, until Mr. Blatt's bank account had been depleted and frozen. When his utility and rent payments bounced, he called his brother Russell for help. What the Blatts soon discovered was $3,000 in withdrawals by the Trump campaign in less than 30 days. They called their bank and said they thought they were victims of fraud. It felt, Russell, Stacey Blatt's brother, said, like it was a scam. So Donald Trump, who I love the poorly educated, Donald Trump is bilking his ostensibly hard-working supporters out of money without their knowledge, using trickery to scam them out of hundreds of millions of dollars. If the total, $122 million, was refunded by the Trump campaign, how many contributions weren't even asked for? It's like, that's too much of a hassle, or they didn't notice it. How many tens of millions or another 100 million was actually ripped off from the American electorate, from his own supporters? This is how it went down. The small and bright box here that I'm going to put on screen popped up on Mr. Trump's digital donation portal around March 2020. The text was boldface, simple and straightforward. Make this a monthly, reoccurring donation. And the box came pre-filled with the check mark, which is bad enough. It's bad enough that they're pre-checking, hoping you won't notice, to make it a reoccurring charge. Well, this started to work. I'm going to show you a graph. By June, the campaign and the RNC were experimenting with a second pre-check box to default donors into making an additional contribution called the money bomb. An early test arrived in the run-up to Mr. Trump's birthday, June 14th. The results were tantalizing. That date, a seemingly random Sunday, became the biggest day for online donations in the campaign's history. Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chairwoman, crowed to Fox News about the achievement without mentioning how exactly the party had pulled it off. Quote, Republicans are thinking smarter digitally, she said, and were poised to outwork, outdo, and outmaneuver the Democrats at every turn. The two pre-checked yellow boxes would be a fixture for the rest of the campaign, and so would a much larger volume of refunds. In early September, just after learning that it had been outraised by the Biden operation in August by more than $150 million, the Trump campaign became even more aggressive. It changed the language in the first yellow box to withdraw recurring donations every week instead of every month. Suddenly, some contributors were unwittingly making as many as a half dozen donations in 30 days. The intended contribution, the money bomb, and 4 more weekly withdrawals. The Trump operation was not done modifying the yellow boxes. Soon, the fact that donations would be withdrawn weekly was taken out of boldface type, according to archived versions of the president's website, and moved beneath other bold text, which means they are trying to obscure what the message is. It really is fine print, hard to read. And if your donors that you're trying to con out of their money are elderly individuals who believe in the America First idea of a white supremacist government, they can't read as well because they can't see as well. So they're trusting their golden god, Donald Trump, that he's not going to scam them. They believe in Donald Trump. Disgusting, con artist, scumbag, carnival barker. He's not only putting these elderly people's lives with a non-response to the pandemic, he's also stealing money from them hand over fist to the tune of $122 million that had to be refunded. Moving on. As the campaign's financial problems became increasingly acute, the yellow boxes became dizzyingly more complex. By October, there were sometimes 9 lines of bold-faced text with all caps words sprinkled in before the disclosure that there would be weekly withdrawals. As many as 8 more lines of bold-faced text came before the second additional donation disclaimer. Look at this chart. Put this on screen. They show the total online refunds, how they spiked, where in September here, by September, the Trump operation began to have online donations recur weekly by default. And that is when you see the spike all the way through past the election. Because Donald Trump, again, do we need any more evidence that he doesn't give a shit about Americans? He has spent his life ripping off small business owners who are contractors who do work for him. He screamed on the campaign about don't pay the person who set up this mine. Don't pay him. That's not how it works. He's a grifter. He's a liar. He's a scumbag. He acted in conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States, having his horde of idiots storm the Capitol. And now we're finding out that he was stealing. And the RNC was complicit. The RNC as a mechanism was involved as well. If you're out there and you're a Republican, or you're Republican light, or you're sympathetic maybe to the ideologies of the Republican Party, you have to know what this organization is about. It's not just about low taxes for the rich. It's not just about voter suppression and making sure black folks don't have a voice in America. It's also about scamming you out of money, about stealing your hard-earned dollars to fund the campaigns. That has to stick with you. That has to bother you. Otherwise, you may want to reflect that you are in a cult. If it's okay that they're stealing you, robbing your money, then you're in a cult that the leaders of can do no wrong. That the prophet has spoken. The prophet needs your money. That's a cult. Anyway, I would love to know what someone thinks out there. You can call, leave me a voicemail, 714-576-4054. Please email me as well, or maybe not in addition to, but email me if that's your preferred mode of communication, daily@dollemore.com. I love you guys. I appreciate you engaging with my content. If you haven't subscribed, excuse me, if you just watched a few videos and I keep getting served to you and you keep clicking and you like what you hear, you probably don't like what you see, but if you like what I'm saying, I would encourage you to subscribe. And if you really like what you hear, you don't even have to look at me this way, is subscribe to my podcast. It's called I Doubt It. My beautiful, talented, and scholarly co-host, Brittany Page, we do a far deeper dive on topics like this, hour and a half or so per episode. We would invite you. It's a good time. We actually play and take contributions from the audience, listening to voicemails and opinions, really trying to move the conversation forward. Anyway, I will leave you with this. If you would like to support my work, I would encourage you to do so. If you can do it, we're not trying to run some kind of a scam operation here. But if you are in a financial position to do so, for as little as $2 a month, about $1.99 a month, you can click the join button and see what the perks are and become a channel member supporting my independent analysis and commentary on the news. I love you. Follow me on social media. I'd love to connect with you there. And I'll see you next time. Be genuine and take care of one another, because so many people aren't taking care of one another. See you next time.